General Miller, let me come to you. Can you help me with something here? Anderson Air Force Base, I understand, this is in Guam, of course. Leaders there recently received an official email that prohibited them from using pronouns or descriptors like he, she, youngest, oldest, male, or female. Why is that? I mean, what's going on?
Senator Hawley, thank you for that question. Actually, that is, we've been talking a lot about that because it was an email, from my understanding, that went out locally from one of the commanders there, and I don't remember at what level. I don't know if it was a group commander or the wing commander there. I believe that it was a Facebook post that went out based on a question. It is not the Air Force policy to not use pronouns. And so I think it was a social media, exacerbated by individuals that said that they were directed for that.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's progress. So you're saying, I'm looking at a news article here published August 31, 2022, saying that PACAF has sent this letter around. Leaders of the base are instructed, do not use pronouns, age, race, etc. And they go on. The unauthorized examples of unauthorized language are male, female, youngest, oldest, he, she. But you're saying that was not an official communication. That has not been a directive.
That is not an official communication from the HAF. Correct.
Okay. And so your position to me is today that is not policy, and that they have not been so instructed.
That is correct.
This is a social media
policy
kerfuffle. I mean, this is not real. It's not happening.
I don't know if it's not happening, but it is not an official policy from the Department of the Air Force.
Okay. I ask because part of the way it's been reported is that the rationale is to help with lethality and also recruiting. And it was curious as heck how not using he, she can help with lethality and how it's helping with recruiting. But I take your word for it that this is not policy, and that satisfies me. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recruiting and...
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much to the ranking member, and thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to the witnesses for being here. General Stitt, let me talk with you. Let me start with you, if I could. I have spoken repeatedly with the Secretary of the Army about replacing aging homes at Fort Leonard Wood in my home state, and there is no doubt in my mind that service members deserve better than they are getting right now. I was just there a few weeks ago. I toured the homes myself. I spoke to residents. I spoke to spouses. I spoke to children who lived in the homes. These homes need to be replaced. What concerns me is the Army doesn't seem to have a plan to replace this aging housing stock. So let me just ask you this. In your opinion, how does the availability or maybe lack of availability of quality military housing for service members and their families affect recruiting and retention?
Senator Hawley, good afternoon. The Army takes the care and quality of life of all of our service members and their families very seriously. So we are making and committed to investing in our housing within not just that, but within our daycare centers, child care, offering opportunities, expanding beyond that for spousal employment, to put kind of a whole package on the table to ensure that our facilities and our care and commitment towards family members is first class.
You say a whole package. When will we be seeing this package?
Senator, we continue to work on it, and I can take that question for the record, please.
Well, that's fine. I mean, but let me just say again, for the record, I've said this in the full committee. I'll say it again here, that I think we're past the point of continuing to kick this down the road. I mean, this is a problem now. Frankly, at Fort Leonard Wood, it was a problem a decade ago. But listen, I've been there. I mean, I've seen it myself. I've talked to the service members myself. I've been in their houses. I've been in their kitchens. I've looked at their bathrooms where there's mold growing. I've seen that they don't have places for their kids. I've seen the substandard living conditions, and it just isn't acceptable, General. You know what? I promised those service members that I'd be a royal pain in the you-know-what until something changed. So I'm keeping that commitment. and I'm going to continue it until something changes. And frankly, I've heard this now it's going on 2 years. I've only been in the Senate 3, but I've heard it continuously that, well, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. Well, at Fort Leonard Wood, we haven't gotten to it. And I bet, if we went around the table here, I bet that the other members of the subcommittee would have the same situation in their state. So I'll give you the question for the record, but I just want to put on notice again, and you can take this back, that I want to see some progress on this, and I want to see it soon. And what I don't want to see are any more commitments from the Army that they're going to spend X number of dollars. This happened last year. We're going to commit X number of dollars to Fort Leonard Wood, and then as it turns out, $0 were spent on housing. I'm still ticked off about that. And I don't want to see it happen again, and I want to see progress made. So that's my piece. I think you understand where I'm coming from. General Miller, let me come to you. Can you help me with something here? Anderson Air Force Base, I understand, this is in Guam, of course. Leaders there recently received an official email that prohibited them from using pronouns or descriptors like he, she, youngest, oldest, male, or female. Why is that? I mean, what's going on?
Senator Hawley, thank you for that question. Actually, that is, we've been talking a lot about that because it was an email, from my understanding, that went out locally from one of the commanders there, and I don't remember at what level. I don't know if it was a group commander or the wing commander there. I believe that it was a Facebook post that went out based on a question. It is not the Air Force policy to not use pronouns. And so I think it was a social media, exacerbated by individuals that said that they were directed for that.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's progress. So you're saying, I'm looking at a news article here published August 31, 2022, saying that PACAF has sent this letter around. Leaders of the base are instructed, do not use pronouns, age, race, etc. And they go on, the unauthorized, examples of unauthorized language are male, female, youngest, oldest, he, she. But you're saying that was not an official communication, that has not been a directive.
That is not an official communication from the HAF, correct.
Okay. And so your position to me is today that is not policy and that they have not been so instructed.
That is
that
correct.
This is a
that
social
is not
media
policy.
kerfuffle. I mean, this is not real. It's not happening.
I don't know if it's not happening, but it is not an official policy from the Department of the Air Force.
Okay. I ask because part of the way it's been reported is that the rationale is to help with lethality and also recruiting. And it was curious as heck how not using he, she can help with lethality and how it's helping with recruiting. But I take your word for it that this is not policy, and that satisfies me. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tuberville, and we'll go through the rest of the services to answer that question when it's my turn. So we'll complete it for the record. But go ahead, Senator
Thank you, Madam
Tuberville.
Chair. Thank y'all very much for being here today. Y'all got a tough job. I recruited for a long time. I know how hard it is. So you've got a challenge, especially when only one out of every 5 American youth is eligible to join the military. The drugs, obesity, the lack of education, criminal activity, they prevent a lot of our young people from even wanting to get in the military. That's hard enough, but this administration has made the job so much harder for you. I feel bad for you. The number one reason young people join the military is they have a family connection. The military is a family business. 80% of our force has a family member presently enlisted. After watching this administration's blunder in Afghanistan, tossing 20 years of sacrifice down the drain, why would a veteran encourage their child to sign up? I know you're running into that problem. So this administration doesn't inspire our youth about America. It paints our service members as extremists, white supremacists, but are surprised that only 9% of young people even want to serve. That's a small pool. Faith in our military has collapsed. For decades, our military was the most trusted organization in America. Under President Biden, trust in the military has cratered 45%. What we have is a national security emergency. So, Secretary Miller, I've reviewed the list of speaking engagements for senior leaders at the Pentagon and could find no trace, zero, of anyone speaking publicly about recruiting, the leaders of our military. But there were plenty of speeches on climate change, Pride Month, and global water security. What is going on here? What actions have the DOJ leaders taken to solve this crisis? Secretary Miller.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. The senior leadership of the department, from Secretary Austin, Secretary Hicks, to the secretaries of the military departments, are absolutely focused on the issue of recruiting and critical retention. And we do see our senior leaders engaging on this topic. Just as recently as this past weekend, we had Army senior leadership that was on the Today Show talking about this issue, because we agree with you that it's important to get our message out to youth and influencers about the opportunities that service affords, and to kind of cut through the chaff that you mentioned on some of the more provocative rhetoric that is often shaped by well-intentioned but perhaps misinformed external providers. And so we agree that through strategic marketing and advertising, strategic engagements by our senior leadership inside the department, that we do have a role to play to ensure that the right information is getting to the right people at the right time about the opportunities that military service affords.
Yeah. Well, I know you are great recruiters, but our leaders, our president, and our leaders in the military that are seen on TV every day, I know they're busy. We got a dangerous world we're living in, but they have got to spend time on helping us recruit. I mean, we need everybody on board. This panel's, we've heard a lot of concerns and critiques, but I want to first take a moment to commend the United States Marine Corps. The Marines are the only service currently to meet the F-22 recruiting numbers. Well done. The Marines are meeting their numbers because they stick to talking about defending our nation. You know, compare any Marine Corps recruiting ad to the Army's woke campaign, and you'll see why the Marine Corps is meeting its numbers. The calling campaign of the Army was so widely trashed that they had to turn off comments on YouTube. And I saw them. I mean, it's not what this country looks for when we're talking about military and to defending our freedom. Dr. Strobe, are there any legal or policy changes that Congress could direct that would allow the services to modernize recruiting efforts and to be more effective with their current budget?
Senator, I'm glad you asked that question. I do think there are some things we need to look at as far as accessing data. When a potential applicant, for example, comes to marines.com, we would like to be able to use modern tools to be able to send targeted advertising to that applicant when they leave our website. So if they click on a picture of a howitzer, we might be able to later have a howitzer show up on something else that they might be looking at. To do that requires us moving out of the telephone book era of just having social directories that the high schools provide us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and along some of those same lines, to add insult to injury, the White House has now decided to cancel up to $20,000 student loan per borrower. Student loan forgiveness and the GI Bill are the two of the biggest and most successful incentives for military recruitment. To your knowledge, any of you, were the consequences of military service recruiting considered during the recent student loan forgiveness? Anybody want to answer that?
Senator, I can answer that. Certainly, for any strategic decision, all of the federal agencies are asked for input, and the White House does take that under consideration. As for the training and education incentives that the Department of Defense offers, it is still a robust package that we can offer to young men and women who are interested in joining the services. And one of the unique things that we have that perhaps other programs don't have is that under certain conditions, you can actually extend those benefits to your family members. And so we still believe that we have a very competitive package to offer to young men and women and potentially their families.
Health care, GI Bill,
Yes, sir.
going to school, paying for school. I mean, they work for welfare benefits, okay? We all know that. We've all seen it, heard about it. And, you know, we need to correct some of this. But I want to end this on, I read an article from Thomas Spohr of the National Defense Director of Heritage. He says, the American military remains a faithful and loyal servant of the Republic. Most Americans are still proud and trusting of our military, but this trust and support cannot be taken for granted. If Americans perceive that the military is being exploited for political purpose or being used for experiments in woke social priorities, that support will evaporate and the consequences will be dire. My hope and prayer are that we figure out all of this before it's too late. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm so glad that Senator Tuberville raised the question of debt forgiveness. I'm sure he's aware that the debt forgiveness package that was designed by the President has disproportionately helped veterans who are struggling with student loan debt because our current benefits do not fully cover the cost of post-high school education for them, and I'm glad to get them any help we can. So I want to echo my colleagues' concerns about the impact of military sexual assault on recruiting and retention. The Department of Defense found that reports of sexual assault went up 13% in 2021, showing that we are clearly going in the wrong direction. But I also want to follow up on an issue raised by Senator Hirona. One of the key tools that our military has for recruitment is the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps program. The JROTC program is led by retired members of the military, and it's meant to teach high school students the values of citizenship. Now, DOD is currently studying how this program impacts enlistment, as they should, but a previous Army study found that these students are more than twice as likely to enlist. Unfortunately, in too many cases, it has become also a hunting ground for predators. A recent disturbing investigation by the New York Times found that at least 33 JROTC instructors have been criminally charged with sexual misconduct, which is higher than the rate for civilian school teachers. Now, Ms. Miller, obviously, if JROTC instructors are sexually assaulting high school students, we have a problem that goes far, far beyond the impact of this behavior on recruitment. But I want to ask, how do you think criminal behavior like this by retired members of the armed services reflects on the military?
Senator, thank you for that question. We agree that the reports from the New York Times are concerning, not only in the fact that this is a criminal act, but to the point that you made that it also reverberates with respect to potential recruitment, and just casts a pall on the JROTC program, which, as you noted, is a program that we're very proud of, both as a citizenship development program and as a way to expose youth to the prospect of military service, since many of them have never had that exposure. We completely agree that additional oversight is necessary, and as General Miller mentioned, the services are actively engaged at looking at their current oversight structures. We also think that we need to take a hard look at our current background investigation process, regardless of whether that individual had a background investigation recently conducted while they were in service, and that we need to look even beyond our traditional background investigation to see if there's other tools that we need to add to that, such as potentially social media checks, to make sure that we get a 360-degree look at those that we are putting in a leadership role to some of our most vulnerable and young Americans.
So I very much appreciate this, and I'm glad that you give a full answer on this. But I'd like to stress another point here. You're talking about background checks, obviously powerfully important before somebody gets out there. But there's also a question about supervision once they're in the field, and a question about how to respond when there's been some kind of concern or allegation raised. And I want to give you an example that goes directly to that. The New York Times piece tells the story of Dominique Mixon, a young woman who entered the JROTC program because she wanted to join the Air Force. That's why she was there. She was groped and harassed by her instructor, Brad Gibson, who had retired after 24 years of service in the military. But here's the part that really pushes me on this. She reported the incident to a teacher. Apparently, Mr. Gibson had already been counseled about quote-unquote borderline behavior before he stuck his hand up Ms. Mixon's shirt. So this was not the first time that he had harassed someone, but it wasn't the last time either. Ms. Mixon's report went nowhere, and she was pushed out of the program. Mr. Gibson, however, continued to lead the JROTC program, and 8 years later, Ms. Mixon received a call that another 16-year-old had filed a report saying that Mr. Gibson was groping her. Now, General Miller, should the Air Force be protecting someone like Ms. Dixon or someone like Mr. Gibson?
Thank you, Senator, for letting me talk about this. So the first thing is sexual assault, sexual harassment. They are crimes. They are crimes, and they're not tolerable. And I will tell you, in the Air Force, we have a very strong preventive program right now, and we're making it more robust, specifically on the IRC. But for junior ROTC or for any individual that is harassed sexually or, any way that they're not treated with dignity and respect, they need to report it. And they need to report it up, and we need to investigate it. So should the individual in this particular case, if he should have been investigated and substantiated, he's removed from that position forever. And ma'am, just one more. You talked about oversight. And for junior ROTCs, there's so many programs, and there's very little oversight. In the Air Force right now, we're looking at putting Guard and Reserve members into some of those programs to provide additional oversight in that, and then also increase the regional directors that are around the world, around the country right now.
Well, this is an important point you raised, because jurisdiction at the federal level is shared between the military services and the Department of Education. But if the military doesn't step up to prevent these kinds of abuses, then it is the military that is endangering our ability to build up our force for the future and for it to have real credibility. The military screens these instructors, and ultimately it is your reputation on the line. I know that my colleagues and I have a number of questions about the oversight of this program and why it failed these students. Today, we sent letters to the DOD and to the Department of Education to try to learn more, and I look forward to learning what steps each of you will be taking to make sure that the military is not responsible for the sexual assault of high school students. I see that I'm over on time, but I do want to just follow up with the question about student loan debt. And that is, loan cancellation right now is helping 43 million Americans who are buried under student loan debt. It is keeping people from starting small businesses, from buying homes, from starting families. I just want to ask the question, do any of the witnesses think that ensuring that 43 million Americans keep choking on student loan debt is the best solution to the military's recruitment problems?
Senator, appreciate that question. We agree that when we are working with potential applicants, I can say that we do look at debt ratio in terms of what debt they may have and how they may be able to still continue to execute the commitment to paying off that debt under our pay structures, particularly if they're starting as a junior enlisted service member. So it is something that we do pay attention to. We do have strong programs, as I said before, for training and education, which includes the ability to do additional incentives for loan repayment. What we actually do find on our side is that in many cases they're actually more interested in looking at what bonuses we offer, because then they have greater flexibility on how they want to use that money and potentially paying off that debt, or if they want to put it towards another priority. But we do agree that looking at current debt ratio is something that we do pay attention to.
think maybe I didn't make my question entirely clear, and that's on me. But I just really want to emphasize the point that surely we have not become a country that thinks that the best way to be able to recruit people into the military is to crush them under a burden of student loan debt and hope that they will then find their way to the military. That we are people who want to show the best of what the military has to offer and work to make sure that none of our young people are crushed by student loan debt. I hope we are all in agreement on that. I'll take that as a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Warren.